Pete Dominic.
I remember.
Stand up.
From a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, the best life hacks for when that Adderall coupon expires. And now, the podcast host who keeps the psychoactives on the shelf and the beard nicely trimmed, Pete Dominic!
Yeah, thank you very much, Pico, for that acknowledgement. You got me right, that's for sure. No drug rules this body, for it is a temple. Except for alcohol and cannabis, which rule it probably too much. Not gonna lie to you. Hello, and welcome to Stand Up, first show of the week, the Monday show, episode 679. How about that? Today, joining me, finance expert, blogger, podcast host, and president of Ritholtz Wealth Management, the great Barry Ritholtz. Had an awesome hour-long conversation with Barry. For you long haulers, I think you're going to like that. And before that, it's Maura Mondays. Maura, Quint, and I had a thoughtful, hilarious conversation as always. Both guests coming up. My interview with Maura starts at 15 minutes, and Barry begins at 49 minutes. A few clips from the weekend, and I hope you're doing well here in the middle of September if you're listening to it then. Thank you to all the new subscribers who have been signing up and editing your pledge upwards. You can always do that if you haven't signed up. Go to standupwithpete.com right now and go to youtube.com/standupwithpete and subscribe. We're posting videos up there. And if you want to help us post videos, if you have any editing prowess at all, it's really easy. Please volunteer for the Stand Up with Pete Dominic Street Team. Get access to the videos with guests early. Help us edit them. Just email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and you can join the Street Team, which is just another way to be a part of our community, to hang out and promote the show and all of the good that we're doing with it. We're forming a team, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. So far, it's been a lot of fun. And we've been releasing a whole bunch of video clips from the interviews, which is just too much for me to do because I'm producing the entire show myself every day. So I can use your help. So sign up. All right. Well, how was your weekend? How are you doing? You had the 9/11, you had the tennis, you had the football, you had the death of the Queen, of course. But there were so many other things that probably got undercovered. And that's why I just wanted to play a few clips from them. Well, here's an important clip I think got a lot of attention, and if it didn't, it probably should have gotten more attention. John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and a weak one at that, when asked to reflect on the last year at his first public appearance since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. He was at the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals conference in Colorado Springs. Sounds like a real riot. Anyway, Roberts said he was, this is on Friday, concerned that lately some critics of the court's controversial decisions have questioned the, quote, legitimacy of the court. He said that's a mistake. Here's a little clip of John Roberts.
The last year was an unusual one and difficult in many respects. It was gut-wrenching every morning to drive into a Supreme Court with barricades around it. Lately, the criticism is phrased in terms of, because of these opinions, it calls into question the legitimacy of the court. Simply because people disagree with an opinion is not a basis for questioning the legitimacy of the court.
Well, there are a lot of reactions on social media and everywhere else. Let me just aggregate them. Basically, John Roberts screwing up voting rights because of the Shelby County decision. Gorsuch, Alito, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett all lying under oath to get on the Supreme Court. And obviously, Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings, which were an absolute embarrassment, disaster, and crimes were probably committed. And John Roberts was talking about legitimacy. Oh, did we mention that Justice Thomas's wife is basically in cahoots with the conspirators of January 6th? Legitimacy of the court is in question. Here is a great clip from CNN with Al Franken, former Democratic senator, on CNN with Alice Stewart, and it gets super awkward. She's a Republican strategist, and you just have to hear this.
I disagree with what the Chief Justice said. The legitimacy of the court was undermined when they wouldn't take up Merrick Garland. And you'll remember that McConnell said it was because it was during election year. And you remember Lindsey Graham pledging that if a vacancy came open, during an election year in 20 that he wouldn't vote for, they wouldn't take up a nominee. They've stolen 2 seats. The one that Merrick Garland wasn't given a hearing for, and the one that Coney Barrett was, where she was seated a week before the election. That destroyed the legitimacy of the court.
Alice, what do you think? Did Chief Justice Roberts sort of, he sort of ignored some of what Al is talking about there, and that there is a tremendous amount of controversy as to how this court got tilted in the direction of the far right. Just to throw a little accuracy in some of what Al said there. Look, the Merrick Garland was held up because we had a divided government. We had a Democrat in the White House, and we had Republicans in control of.
That's not what McConnell said.
But that's the way historically this has been. When you're in close to an election year and you have divided government.
That's not the way it's been historically done.
Yes, and when you have divided government, there typically is inclination to.
Tell me when this happened before.
When you're close to Merrick Garland is certainly one. When there's a divided government,
no, before Merrick Garland,
they're not moving forward.
Tell me when this happened before.
Al, I'm telling you, this is what the Mitch McConnell.
Tell me when it happened before.
I can't.
You said this is what happened historically. Tell me when it happened before.
Look, this is the way that the Republicans went. Like, I can't give you an exact example of when this happened in the past.
You know
but
why you can't?
Tell you,
because it hadn't happened before.
Look, the basis for not appointing him was because of that specific reason. But moving forward,
it wasn't. And McConnell explicitly said that it was the, quote, Biden rule. And he quoted a little piece of a speech that Biden had given in June of 80. And Biden said they wouldn't take up if they weren't consulted. And this was about someone resigning in June after a term of the court, which is very different than someone dying. Scalia died in February. And you saw, you guys, if you can find the tape, you can find Lindsey Graham saying, keep the tape. We will not take up a judge if someone dies, a nominee, if someone dies in an election year in the next election. This is total hypocrisy. And you actually, I'm surprised that you're claiming this and you can't come up with an example because there is none. But
to get back to the point of the conversation here.
What a brutal drubbing. What a rude former Senator Al Franken, and an absolutely appropriate. I had no problem with it at all. I like that kind of thing, except for when it's about me or against me and I'm on TV or the radio, though. I can't recall that quite such a brutal, embarrassing debunkment happened in the moment. All right, more reaction. You knew Eric Siegel was going to have to weigh in on this, and he did on TikTok at SCOTUS Siegel. Here he is.
Hello.
Hello.
Professor Eric Siegel here, back to tell you what the con in con law is. I've been on hiatus for a while, but I'm back. Yesterday, Chief Justice John Roberts at a legal conference said that he didn't want the American people to lose faith in the Supreme Court because of the decisions that it reaches. And he said the American people don't want politicians to say what the law is. That is such an absurd statement because Supreme Court justices, of course, are politicians. Now, they don't run for re-election, but they are governmental officials. They wield a lot of power, and they clearly are politicians. Many people think Chief Justice Roberts is an institutionalist who cares about his own legitimacy and the courts, and more importantly, the court's legitimacy. That's wrong. As I've written in a law review article, what Chief Justice Roberts leads with is hubris. He is the man who wants to end all affirmative action. He is the man who gutted the Voting Rights Act. He is the man who uses the First Amendment as a sword against consumer legislation. I could go on and on and on. Chief Justice Roberts does not tell us what the law is. He tells us what he wants the law to be. And he is from head to toe a politician. And he should know better. And what his speech over the weekend shows is that he is a man of great hubris. And that is a terrible characteristic for the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There he goes. On Twitter. How about that? Siegel on TikTok. Love it. Okay, well, another story that got maybe buried by 9/11, the death of the Queen, and Football Sunday, week 1. Apparently, there were major gains made by the Ukrainian military in an offensive. I'll be talking with Bill Boyle about this, hopefully tomorrow. But I wanted to share with you a clip from David Sanger and Mary Jordan, who were on ABC's This Week, and were asked about it by Terry Moran, who was hosting.
The most astonishing story of the weekend, Ukraine, the collapse of the Russian forces in the sector in the east. Mary, I want to ask you about that, and David as well.
It's a huge deal. We'll see if it lasts. But the idea that we have Russians retreating, we have this new boost of morale among the troops in Ukraine. They're today, right now, crying in the streets, saying we pushed them back. We got new Ukrainian land. This is what it's going to do for the morale in a bad way to Russia, and what it is going to do in a good way for Ukraine is a very, very significant. And, we're talking about what's ahead in England. They need grain. They need this war to stop because the knock-on effects are huge if it ends.
And the Ukrainians resourceful and brave once again. But what about the Russians? What do they do now? What are the dangers here?
So there is a great opportunity here and a great risk. The opportunity is that for the first time, Zelensky may be in a position, President Zelensky of Ukraine, to move toward a negotiated settlement to this war. He needed an upper hand to be able to do that and Putin to be willing to do it. The other problem, though, is that Putin himself may overreact to this, and he has at various moments threatened the use of more extraordinary weapons. Yeah.
Big deal. A lot of big news happening there. I'll hopefully be talking with Bill Boyle about that tomorrow. Who else would you like to hear from on the show this week? You can always email me at standupwithpete@gmail.com. Let me know who you want to hear. Well, I took in a lot of media on Sunday, several shows that I listened to at speed and a half. I heard conversations about the Queen, politics, 9/11, and more. I really did, though, like this at the end of ABC's This Week. They played clips of several U.S. presidents making comments to the Queen or about the Queen, and I thought this was just a great montage, so I lifted it for you to hear, and then we'll get to my guests today.
We leave you with a final snapshot of Queen Elizabeth's legacy, the monarch who met with 13 sitting U.S. presidents, a signal of that special bond between the two nations.
This dinner is a humbling reminder of the fleeting nature of presidencies and prime ministerships. Your Majesty's reign has spanned about a dozen of each, and counting. That makes you both a living witness to the power of our alliance and a chief source of its resilience.
The American people are proud to welcome Your Majesty back to the United States, a nation you've come to know very well. You helped our nation celebrate its bicentennial in 1976. She gave me a look that only a mother could give a child.
Your Majesty, for generations, our peoples have worked together and fought together side by side. As democracies, we continue our quest for peace and justice.
She has embodied the spirit of dignity, duty, and patriotism that beats proudly in every British heart.
We have many distinguished visitors here in this city, but never before have we had such a wonderful young couple who so completely captured the hearts of all of us.
I had the opportunity to meet her before she passed, and she was an incredibly gracious and decent woman.
I ask you to join me in a toast to Her Majesty the Queen. To the Queen.
ABC News this week put that together, and I thought it was interesting, so I wanted to share it with you. All right, well, that's all the news clips I've got for you on today's episode. Let's get to those conversations that you came here for anyway. Coming up, Barry Ritholtz, but right now, I've got Maura Quint. She is the Wealth Tax Campaign Director over at Americans for Tax Fairness. She's the co-founder of Tax March, as well as a member of the Pennsylvania Working Families Party Endorsement Committee. Also a great writer. She's led rooms of comedy writers in service of bringing humor to progressive activism and regularly contributes to a variety of publications that you've seen and read. She resides in Pennsylvania with her children and an occasional houseplant. I'm actually reading the intro from the website, Americans for Tax Fairness. You got to follow her on Twitter, at Behind Your Back, where she is huge on Twitter. Very, very she's a big influencer there. She's a good friend of mine. We caught up, talked about several things from the Queen to pumpkin spice. We covered a lot today. I think you're going to love it. Maura's always great and sharing videos online now too, so check those out. Here we go right now. Haven't done in a little while, and play your jingle. How about that?
All right.
When regressive taxation has gone too far and your Bloody Mary's just not up to par, it's Maura Monday.
Oh, well, that ended abruptly, I feel like.
I feel like you ended it abruptly.
No, I think I might have. I hit something. Oh well. Pete Coe with the Maura Mondays jingle. It is time to talk to Maura Quint. Thank you very much for joining me as always. There's plenty to discuss here in the third week of September, where you've got September 11th, you've got the death of the Queen, and the first week of football seemingly are in the zeitgeist that I'm seeing, plus autumn stuff. What are you feeling about this time of September and any of those subjects? Because I know you want
all of America's pastimes in 1 week. It's really amazing. It's incredible.
Yeah, 9/11
very patriotic week. Yeah,
is become a pastime in a way because it's a tradition to, I don't know. Actually, where are you on it? You live in Pennsylvania where a plane crashed. You remembered 9/11. And
I am old enough to remember 9/11. There are kids in college who are not now. They were born after it, which is just terrifying. So like 9/11 now is like their JFK assassination for us, you know?
Yeah, except for JFK being assassinated and a terrorist attack on our country. Such dramatically different things. But I guess the question is, how do you talk to your kids who didn't obviously live through it about a thing if it comes up? That's where I'm at in my life. That's what 9/11 is. It's discussing it with my kids to some extent.
Do you? Did you?
Oh,
Have
yeah,
you?
all the time. Sure.
You're like, yeah, absolutely. Every Tuesday we get together and we just have a 9/11 discussion.
We have a lot of conversations about national security.
Plane etiquette, etc. Oh my goodness. My kids, I just took them out of the country, as you know, but they'd never been on, an international flight. And I have 2 boys, and we were in the airport and everyone decided, okay, we're going to go to the bathroom before our, next flight. I went into the women's room, like, I'll meet you out here after. I came out of the women's room to see my children's backpacks outside the bathroom up against a wall, because they just thought, you don't bring your backpack into the bathroom. Like, we're going, and they left them unattended there in the airport. And I was just like, this is how you know your children were born after 9/11. Like, it doesn't even occur to them.
Well, hold on a second. Wait, the bathroom in the airport?
Yeah. The men's room.
I almost feel like, regardless of national security and 9/11, why wouldn't they bring their backpack into it's their stuff? Why wouldn't they? Why did they leave their stuff?
Our suburb kids, they're not city kids. They don't have a lot of like public bathroom experience, They just have it at school where it stays in the classroom and then you go to the bathroom, or now in like a locker. Like, they're not wandering through the world, navigating, having a backpack on them and going to the bathroom.
All right. We have several follow-ups from the press here at Stand Up. First question is, when you walked out and saw your kids' backpacks, was it like, oh my God, they'd been snatched? Or did you immediately realize, oh, they just left them out there? Luckily, no one was worried that they were ticking time bombs because they were like a Spider-Man backpack. I mean, what?
I was not looking for my kids. I was looking for like airport security coming in with the bomb squad. Like, I was like, oh, shit. I assumed the children were fine. I just was like, I got to grab these before they blow them up.
Have you discussed this anywhere in another podcast or on social media at all? Because this is hilarious.
No, you are the first and only.
Wow, we've got an exclusive. I mean, think about it, folks. Her kids went to the bathroom and left their backpack out. There couldn't have been much of value in those backpacks. Did they have an iPad or anything?
They did. They had, one had like a little, an iPad or a reader, not an iPad. We're not that fancy. We can't afford iPads. They have like, whatever the knockoff version of an iPad is. That's what they have.
Well, let's go to Roger in Mississippi. Roger. Yeah, Maura, what was the conversation like when they came out? Did you just simply say, hey, you guys can bring them in there? Or did you scold them? Like, what were you thinking?
Hi, Roger. Nice to meet you.
Sure.
You sound a lot like Pete. You could have at least tried to differentiate your voice. That's all I'm saying, But anyway, beyond that, I was like, it was one of those moments where, as a parent, you realize, like, you're upset until you realize it's your failure because they've never had to learn this and you've never taught them this, right? So, like, how could they reasonably have known? Maybe they should have. Maybe they just should have assumed you don't leave something for people to take. Yeah, that's fair enough. But like the specificity of at an airport, you really can't leave a bag unattended was something I had not chatted with them about because we hadn't talked about how, people try to blow up airports sometimes and airplanes and maybe fly them into buildings. We didn't have that conversation.
Oh, yeah, we had it when the kids were born.
Look at this beautiful baby girl. Now, let me tell you about why we have to take our shoes off on planes.
I used to do a joke about that in my stand-up act when Ava, I think, was an infant and we were traveling and TSA is like, you got to take her shoes off. And I looked at her. She was in a stroller. She couldn't walk. And I just said, I don't even think those are shoes. It's like a leather, like sock, like a moccasin almost for a baby. And he's like, I don't make the rules. And I'm like, she's not reading a Noam Chomsky pop-up book. I mean, like, what kind of a terrorist are you?
What kind of a terrorist is a Noam Chomsky pop-up book reader is what I want to know.
It teaches you to hate America.
A social terrorist.
Howard Zinn, I should have gone with. Teaches you to hate America. I don't know. They weren't.
Sure. One of them damn liberals.
So... all right, so 9/11, I didn't even pay any attention to it. I was really thinking more about so many other issues. I spent time listening to podcasts over the weekend, preparing for the show to think about like different subjects like the energy grid and renewable energy, and obviously things like tax policy that you're an expert on. But it seems like, and I was looking for some coverage, daily news show, but a lot of Queen stuff, a lot of stuff.
Queen.
Very Queen dominated. Why do you, are there big ratings in America for Queen coverage? There must be, right?
I feel like we won a war so that we didn't have to hear Queen coverage anymore. But yet, it seems like this is the thing. This is all anybody wants to talk about.
It gave me a great gift because the Queen's death gave my family a great gift because Julia and I started watching The Crown on Netflix, and we don't really watch anything. And she was really enjoying it, asking a ton of questions. And so thank you. Long live the Queen for that.
Oh, you started watching it because the Queen died?
Yes. She was like, yep. Oh, I'm sure a lot of people probably will. Like, who's this Queen? What's this?
I love that. I love death-based programming. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
It's Tom Hanks' entire career now. Every role is based on a dead person that he's played. But... yeah, so you have a lot of objections, it seems like, to monarchy and to this family and to the British Empire.
Do you want me to be really fair? I could be really fair here. Is that any fun or is that too boring?
I want you to be fair because I was already worried about asking you about this because I was like, Maura's just going to shit on the Queen without being sensitive to the fact that a lot of people are for whatever reason, like. But I don't know that it's at the same time, a lot of people don't want to be sensitive to this family. And I understand that, too. So you do what you want.
So the day that the Queen died was, for me, my favorite day on Twitter in forever. It's the first time I've been on Twitter and I was laughing out loud. I thought there were so many good jokes. And it was great because everyone was pointed in one direction. Like everyone around the world, just about. Obviously, not everyone in the entire world, but quite a large swath of the world. Way to go, British Empire. Everybody was looking in a singular place at the same time. And that is so incredibly rare.
Yeah.
So that alone was like a kind of, I hate to say fun, but kind of a fun event because we rarely have things that unify us in these like massive, massive ways. And I thought it was incredibly fascinating how differently people were responding. And, I deal with everything through humor. I'll make a joke about everything all the time. And my Twitter is my nicer version. The jokes I like to make, I say it quietly to people that know and love me already, because that's where my humor goes. And I recognize that's not for everyone. But I thought it was a fucking hilarious day on Twitter. Now, that said, my thoughts on the Queen, I don't. I think monarchy is, I think we're a little bit past that. I think it's a little ridiculous. I think the amount of money that's going to be spent in all of these countries to change the currency and to, shut down their parliaments and all of this stuff is pretty ridiculous. And, it's that sort of idea of bread and circuses, except we got rid of the bread and now it's just circus. And that's all we sort of give the people. So yeah, I have a problem with monarchy in general. The specificity of Queen Elizabeth, I don't know. I mean, she presided over a lot of brutality, how much she actually could do, how much she was just a strong figure who inherited a terrible legacy and just dealt with as much grace as she could. I mean, these are all fair things. She's, it's clearly a complicated thing. And I don't think that any one of us can say we know what we would do or who we would be if we were born into that sort of expectation and lineage.
I can.
Yeah, well, I know who you'd be too, sure. Yeah.
Wait,
you'd be a
you
tyrant.
do? Go
Just
ahead.
An absolute tyrant.
Small.
Which was the king that locked up the princes in the tower and stuff like that? That's what I assume.
Yeah, I'm like a smaller king too.
It's like the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland, just off with their heading, everyone.
You tweeted, "Sorry I'm late, but the Queen died on John's birthday, so obviously the DM group is at nuclear level meltdown." I don't get the joke.
No one did or would, but it was.
It was for one person.
It was for a few people. One of which being, I do have a small DM group. It was John's birthday, and everyone was just going to town making crazy fucking jokes about John killing the Queen and all sorts of things like that. But then the joke broadly more was just how people can get wrapped up in these little groups and little social microcosms that sort of suck you in and pull all focus away from everything you should be doing. But I was really just entertaining myself.
Oh, I love those, by the way. I'm in I'm mostly and mainly, actually, I think exclusively text chats with people. A lot of listeners to the show, and there's all these inside jokes. Yeah, a few. Yeah, it's fun.
I only have one. I really have one tiny DM group that I got added to, and then no others. And I want to be part of groups.
Oh, well, we could let's create one. We'll find.
Okay.
Well, it's just you got to curate it. You got to get the right people, because you don't want anybody in there that's throwing shade. They're the kind of the grapefruit in the fruit salad. They kind of taint everything. You know what I mean? They talk too much, or they're somehow aggressive or something. You just got to find. It's tough to find the right mix.
It is. I tried once, and I put together this group of girls as a DM group, and they're all wonderful, brilliant, creative, interesting, intelligent people, and they're fantastic. The problem is they don't keep it going. They're not. None of them are putting in enough to really make this thing click.
You got to fertilize them. You got to a little bit, but at the same time, they can get sometimes they get going. See, for me, it's usually text, and all of a sudden you look at your phone and there's 120 texts, and you're like, "Shit, do I really need to catch up with this?" But I think people are forgiving if you didn't, or if it's about you or something and you missed it. I don't think people realize that's okay. But anyway, back to what about just the idea that Queen Elizabeth seemed to be a fairly strong and independent woman at a time, when what we were watching with, I suppose, gender role evolution from the 50s up into where we are now. She got in the car and took the wheel behind the Saudi king at the time, when women aren't even supposed to drive, and she knew how to fix an engine and other things that I saw on Netflix's The Crown.
I was going to say, how far into the series did you get? Is this all covered in episode 1, or are you guys staying up all night binging this stuff?
Yeah, no, this is just a few of my observations. Do you think, what about that part of her, that she was this type of woman, a kind of independent, strong leader?
Look, I mean, she's much older, but for me, it falls very much in the same category of where I put Hillary Clinton, which is two people who I do not agree with on many fronts, and whose who I have a lot of problems with on sort of ideological levels, but who, yes, I have to certainly point to and say that these are women who were dealing with a completely different culture. Unfortunately, not different enough, but certainly a more restrictive culture, a far more patriarchal and misogynistic culture. And they found a way to hold themselves to very high standards and to do really quite well for themselves, whatever that might mean. But they succeeded, I think, in being their own people. And that was already a very difficult task. So I certainly can give credit where it is due. And they both
look at
deserve that.
A very nuanced, thoughtful Maura Quint. That's what I like that. I like what you said. I think that's very a good way for people to look at not only Queen Elizabeth, but Hillary Clinton and other women who are, let's say, have been problematic for any number of reasons in terms of their leadership or scandal that they've caused or been involved with.
I think when we look at a lot of minorities and women, that is often the case. We have to recognize what sort of obstacles that these individuals come out of. Now, let me give you the flip side too. And I certainly saw someone say this in a more eloquent way, but in terms of the chastising of be respectful, don't make fun of the Queen's death. And, this is someone, and I truly have no idea whom, and I bet it was more than one person for that matter, but basically said, look, we are in a society that completely devalues death. Humans die and are killed every single day, and we are told no one cares and no one's helping. And we have created a society where you will be fed into the machine and no one will care about your death. So when I'm looking at a society that has produced this and a monarchy that has wrung so many people through that machine and has just murdered so many people through this empire, not once did they ever stop to pause on any one of those thousands, millions, millions of deaths. You cannot now ask me to pause on this woman's. It is in no way fair. And that, that seems more than fair to me as well. So I personally certainly understand those. And I understand those too who are very affected by the Queen's passing because they held her in some esteem for whatever reason, whether it be, through feminism or just, I'm not sure. I don't quite know what drives royalists in general, but I appreciate that, people have different heroes. So, I get that. But I don't think that you can pause and ask people whose families and lives and cultures have been brutalized and pillaged and tell them that they need to remain respectful in this moment. They do not. Well, what about the good things that the royal family, the monarchy brought to some of those countries who they colonized and who they destroyed? They brought good things too. I'm sure some of the people they killed also sucked. You tweeted, you repinned this tweet maybe as a result of the Queen's death. I don't know. Whoever started that "do not speak ill of the dead" thing must have been a real piece of shit. Yes, I repinned it. I like to pin that anytime people started on that stuff because I do not in any way understand that "don't speak ill of the dead." Like that's exactly the time. I mean, it's not. You should speak ill of them way before. You should certainly let people know when they're terrible and you should let them know it constantly. But you certainly don't turn that off just because they're dead. What the hell is that? That makes no sense unless you're that afraid of ghosts. But my experience having trash talked a lot of dead people is that they're not paying that close attention to individual offenders. Some people would say, well, if you're going to speak ill of the dead, then you should be prepared for people to speak ill of your death, or maybe. Yes, of course you should. Why not? I expect people to speak ill of me now. And if I am living my life in such a way that I'm causing millions of deaths to others, yeah, you better fucking trash talk me. Oh my God! If I've been a total piece of shit, yeah, call me out on it right now for that matter. But go ahead and say it once I die. I've known you for a couple of years. I'm already going to start writing jokes to shit on you at your death. I can't. Oh, my God. I've already written several. Can you help me? I'll give you some.
I asked you to help me punch up this new stand-up thing I'm going to do, but could you just help me write some jokes about you to deliver upon your death? Who gets your Twitter account control when you pass?
I'm so happy that you asked me this, because like I said, I've already written the jokes. I didn't know who was going to present them, and now you're serving a really good role here. Yeah, I've got a lot. I'm ready to totally roast myself after I die, and it just is such a bummer that I wouldn't be able to be there to do it. So thank you.
Wow, that's already a plan. I love it. A very thoughtful, nuanced take on the Queen as well.
Did you ever hear, I'm sorry to cut you off completely, but have you ever heard of the people who like pay someone to come and like, cry or like stare, and like stand in the distance and become like this mysterious figure at their funeral? Like people have actually done this. It started, I think, probably as a joke, but there are individuals who like, you can pay them before you die to like come and like.
Why would you do that?
Just to create some mystery about yourself or romance about yourself or whatever it may be. But I really like this idea of prepaying a comedian to like show up and just start roasting you. I think we should make that a thing. This could be a business model. That's all I'm saying.
I love that idea if that's what you wanted, but I don't know why I thought when you were explaining that, like to have like also a clown just with a horn, just with, doing balloon tricks, something absurd the whole time. Someone's giving a eulogy, by the way, anyway, that could be someone.
I just want to be holding a bowl of guacamole and everyone who comes up to the coffin just can like take a scoop and stuff. Carry on.
You just said that on the record. There's going to be a discussion. Do you think?
I don't think it's going to be such a big discussion.
Do you think Maura was serious? Does anybody have any guacamole?
The problem is I'm the one always making the guacamole. It's going to really put people in a bind.
I'm sure you have some in the freezer.
Ew, no.
For your death?
Make guacamole fresh immediately.
Oh,
that's gross. You
wow.
cannot freeze guacamole. How disgusting.
I really touched a nerve there.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could.
Yeah, you really did. You really did.
Are there other rules I should know about things you can't freeze? I didn't realize that. I guess that makes
there's
sense.
A lot. Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know all of them, but there's a long list of rules. I'll get a book for you.
Oh, by the way, I love this tweet of yours referencing on September 11th that this is a day when a whole bunch of conservative Americans like to pretend that they love New York. And of course, now I can't find it. It must be from today. How about that? Here it is.
Yeah.
Stand by. Happy one day of the year, conservatives have to pretend to love New York before going back to using it as a shorthand for crime-infested Jewish liberal gay hellmouth. Such an important point. Well, yeah, flesh that out a little bit, because every year or it used to be at least, this height of patriotism and obviously this worship of first responders, both firefighters and police officers. And I live in a county where that lost a lot of those people. Of course, I was living in New York when it happened. But yeah, what about that? The New York love and patriotism.
Yeah, they get really into it. They get a real like, oh, everybody's got to show New York City and, hearts and lights. And it's so goodness, our heart is there and this is our country. And it becomes, New York is such a it becomes this vital symbol of the country when every other day of the year, it's like, I'm not New York. New York is, they might as well just float off into the ocean. There's crazy fucking liberal, just whatever terrible slurs they want to throw in there. But that's what they mean every other time. It's, East Coast liberal, New York elite bullshit.
There really is.
One day.
There really is a lot of the, when you think about it, there's a lot of, it's so much of it's just anti-Semitic and anti-gay, and Chuck Schumer being a powerful senator, the most powerful senator in the entire U.S. Senate, being a New Yorker, being Jewish, sounding like a typically Jewish guy, and it's just, you just tie it all up, and obviously a mecca of all types of love being.
I'm sorry, a mecca of Jews? That's great. That doesn't get put together a lot.
No, a mecca of all types of love.
Oh, okay.
Sex, LGBT, you name it, is happening in New York. But that was a hard turn. I apologize, everybody.
No, it was great. No, it was more unifying than any Mideast talk has ever been.
Do you think that we're going to hear anything in the news this week? Do you think that we're going to hear more about the investigation into Donald Trump stealing documents? Or yesterday I saw a video of them when he was apparently back in May, getting on a plane, and he had a whole bunch of boxes of documents that he was taking with him. Who knows if he's got them all over the country, by the way.
I love it. I love how absolutely brazen it is. Love and also hate. I mean, I truly am trying not to pay any attention to that because, it's been what are we, 5-6 years out of like just next big Trump scandal that nothing happens with, that we're all like edge of our seats. It's this is going to be the one. Yeah. And then absolutely just, oh yeah. You remember when that happened? Remember when Trump did that terrible thing? Nobody cared.
How confident are you that, I guess if I were to say something specific, he will or will not be indicted? And what is the time threshold where we revisit it and we're like, yep, Maura was right?
Oh God. I don't want to be right. That's the problem.
Sure.
Like, I don't think he will be. I don't think anything's going to happen. And I want desperately to be wrong. I'm dying to be wrong. I will say, let me see if I have her handle up. But do you follow Jennifer Taub?
Yes.
So she is like my go-to person on all of this stuff. I just follow her.
She's a legal professor. She wrote a book called Big Dirty Money and Other People's Houses. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, she's also one of the co-founders of Tax March, which is how I came to know her.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, she's incredible. And she does a really good job of breaking down whatever is happening legally with Trump at any given moment. So I just sort of like, I'm basically, I follow Jen and I just hope that, she'll tell me, like, I'll see something in the timeline with her being really excited and I'll be like, something's going down. And other than that, I just kind of tune it out because I don't have the bandwidth.
She tweeted, row, row, row your vote. It's the November theme. Merrily, merrily, merrily. Or choice is but a dream. I nailed it in the first reading.
Wow. Did we have to do that in a round? Was I supposed to start right after you?
Oh, that's what they do. Everybody's using that.
Yeah,
this is the first time I'm seeing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What does it mean? Just that women's reproductive rights are up for, that's it? That's all you need to know?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, in a lot of ways, too, it is. I saw something about Texas Democrat voter registration being up, and so much of it being tied to abortion rights. I mean, like, look, if you're not otherwise politically invested, this is an issue that might grab your attention and might be worth, because it is a very immediate, personal thing that you'll know. It's not this sort of like ideological battle where maybe we're going to get something down the line if we get enough, blah, blah, blah. This is very straightforward. Do you have the right to an abortion or do you not?
I think I've stopped asking the question, did the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision, will it animate voters? I'm not asking that anymore. Clearly, it is animating voters. And the question is how much, and we can speculate on that. But I think a better question in a conversation is, what are you seeing, or in this case, as a woman, what are you feeling that informs that this is obviously mattering for a lot of people? That's the question I'm asking. Like, what specifically do you see? You just mentioned one data point about independent voters, I think, in Texas. What else?
I don't know, because I'm in Pennsylvania and it's a little bit of a different question. I think that it is a strongly motivating idea in a place like Texas, for instance. I think Texas really has it because there are a lot of people who fall in a lot of different types of ideological places in Texas. Yeah. And there are a lot of people there are a lot of people across the country, but Texas, I think, was one of the first ones that had that abortion ban. So they are the best test case for how motivating it is. Pennsylvania, it's kind of a different thing. We don't have one of the, what are they called, trigger laws. So, abortion is still fully legal here and likely will be. The only thing it's really driving in this election is we have two crazy people, Republicans, running for Senate and governor here. Yeah. And the governor one is like,
Doug Mastriano. He was an insurrection. People at this point. Yeah, go ahead. and Josh
everyone
Shapiro.
thinks that they have the craziest person. And like Iowa can definitely stake some claim. They have some really fucking, like they've had Steve King, they've got Grassley. They've got some nutty
I mean,
ones.
Wisconsin's going to reelect or not Ron Johnson. So he's an old name. People forget that we need to include him in super, super crazy.
Yeah. Ron DeSantis as well is like, he's trying to make some sort of mainstream element of himself, but he's a fucking,
I haven't mentioned this yet. I should tell you, and I haven't even said it on the podcast. The woman that he chose to run with, her name is Carla Matz. And I know her really well because she's one of the union heads of one of the teachers unions that are all part of this overall union in Florida Education Association. I know her. I've hung out with her a bunch of times at these events, and she's awesome. And he wanted to pick, I guess, a Latino female teacher to be his lieutenant governor. I think it's really animated folks there. And I just wanted to tell you and everybody, she's an amazing, amazing woman that I really got to know. And I'm super psyched that Charlie Crist picked her. And anyway,
I was so confused because I really thought you were saying Ron DeSantis picked her. And I'm like, what is happening here? God. That's really great.
You probably weren't the only one then. Carla Hernandez Matz. Okay. Sorry to confuse everybody there. Sorry. I'll have to go back and edit that maybe. Jeez.
No. It's fun. It it gives us all a sense of anticipation and it keeps us engaged. Honestly, it was, I'm sure, a clearly purposeful choice you were making.
Right.
Best. No, but so there's all these like ridiculous, terrible people. But I think that Pennsylvania right now might be able to claim the craziest. I mean, Doug Mastriano he's really, really far out there. And it's, what is far right keeps moving ever away. At this point, it's in like distant galaxies. But I mean, he wants to create a full, like, I don't even want to say a theocratic state because it is, but at the same time, it's not really based in any biblical text. It's like based in whatever their absolute insane, hyper conservative, like, this is just it. I've lost the ability for words with this.
I got it. Man world.
Man world?
I mean, it's really more than anything else, the thing that encompasses whatever we're trying to pin a label to this type of Christian nationalism. It's patriarchy. It's men in charge of, I mean, that's obviously racism too, but so it's like white man world, I guess. That's what it seems to be more than anything else. Just saying.
That sounds right. That's
not a brilliant thing to say, but that's who
we still need a better word though, because white man world still just sounds like a dude's garage where he's watching a lot of football with a mayonnaise based dip for his potato chips.
It's also it's actually an amusement park in Scranton too, but that's what I got it. White man world. People don't know about it. It's really deep into the woods.
I'm so afraid that you're
speaking
serious,
of the woods. I wanted to ask you, and I want to ask everybody to think about this. What does autumn mean to you? I just read this weekend, I think in the New York Times, because that's what I do on Sundays. I have a pipe, a monocle. I sit in a mahogany bookcase.
In white man's world.
Read in white man's world. And anyway, it said like peak leaf season. And that's where I'm at in my life at age 46. Like I'm thinking about this time. It's like the end of September and the first couple weeks of October. So I consider that peak autumn as well, because that's the first thing I think of is leaves. But what do you think of? How are you feeling about it? Do you like this time of year? Is it too early to have some of the things in the stores? I feel like we're in it. This is it.
I feel like September is the moment where you're allowed to start doing fall stuff. So it's fine. I love fall. It's my absolute favorite season. I should live in the Pacific Northwest where it's like a perma fall, kind of always a little bit cool.
Right.
I love it. But I am not like, I don't suddenly hang up things on my walls that say like autumn in script or, get excited for pumpkin spice, which is just wrong. And makes me angry, but that's all right.
Oh, really? You don't like pumpkin flavored anything or just?
Oh gosh. The levels of conflict in me right now are raging so hard.
Wow. What's happening?
Hard
what's happening?
Because there's one side of me that is just screaming at me like, let people have their like seasonal things. Let them enjoy it.
Yeah.
great. Good for them. Yeah. That's amazing. There's a time of year where something happens that you get excited over. Good. Take joy in that. Find joy where you can, children. There is so little of it. Like, that is absolutely a very loud voice. And then there's the other voice in my head, which is just like, oh, fuck you. Like, stop it with this fucking pumpkin spice everything. It's bullshit. You could put pumpkin spice on other things if you want, but really, what are you talking about? Nutmeg and cinnamon? Like, it's just not pumpkin flavored anything. First of all. Second of all, you don't actually like pumpkin. Third, you just, I don't know, what are you doing? Like some sort of obsession with Starbucks or Instagram or like some other sort of consumerist bullshit nonsense. Just go fuck yourself with this. Take some pumpkin spice and rub it on your ass and then lick it up. I don't know, but these are both just like in such a deep conflict inside of me. So, yeah, sure.
Well, I think those two people are so fascinating, which is why I love talking to you about anything. Maura, thank you, as always, for joining me. Happy autumn and football and all of the other things that we talked about. And I look forward to talking to you next week.
Me too.
Oh, I think I cut her off. All right, there you go. Maura Quint. Check her out on Twitter. Go follow her there. She's so good there if you haven't. Tell her you always enjoy her on the show. That means a lot to her, to me, to everybody. Thank you to all of those who do on Twitter and social media. Follow and like and all of the rest. Now it's time to get to my second guest on today's show. We caught up on Friday and had a great conversation, as we always do. He is co-founder, chairman, and chief investment officer at Ritholtz Wealth Management. He runs the Big Picture blog. He wrote Bailout Nation. He hosts Masters in Business, which is an awesome podcast we talked a little bit about on today's show. And he's a very good friend of mine. We talked about electric cars and the labor market. We talked a little bit about politics and more. As always, he's on Twitter at Ritholtz. I hope you'll go say hello. Take it away, Barry.
Using video. You didn't tell me that. I'm unshaved.
You don't care. People, by the way, I think there's a conceit.
I'm in a T-shirt. So let's talk about EVs when I'm wearing a 427 Cobra shirt, like the least efficient engine ever made.
Well, you're a car guy. Nobody's going to call you a hypocrite. But here's the thing.
I told you my project I started, right? Electrifying an old classic. We could talk about that.
Well, you're doing that to your own car. I saw a link where it was, I didn't read about it, but people are taking classic cars and making them electric, like an old anything?
Like a 70s era 911 and converting it to a EV.
Can you do that with pretty much, I suppose you can do that with any car, but it must.
Well, so if you do it with a car that's never been done, it's $1 bajillion. If you do it with a car that they've done it before and have all the components, I don't want to say it's cheap, but it's rational. It's not, you're not, you're the second mouse. You're not the first mouse. That's the old joke. The second mouse gets the cheese.
Right.
The first mouse, So just the components. They use a Tesla motor, a Tesla other batteries, controllers, chargers, all these things. It's like $30,000 worth of electronics. That's before labor. So It is not inexpensive, but, you're using something that's already been made. And you're taking something that otherwise would pollute. It's arguably the most, people do the math wrong on EVs. There's a massive climate cost every time a new Tesla or a new, Audi e-tron is manufactured. It's, adding to pollution. It takes, I think it's 4 years before just the manufacturing is break even. That's one way to look at it. On the other hand, if they were manufacturing an internal combustion engine, it'd be the same amount of pollutants. So all other things being equal.
Yeah. That's an important point. I hear this all the time, and I think the way to say it is all cars, all things that are made pretty much have a carbon footprint. They require energy to be manufactured or built. The difference is
afterwards.
After the car is on the road, it is not then adding to greenhouse gases because unless, of course, it's arguably, if you want to get really technical, if your Tesla, if your EV is charging up at your home and your home electricity is using a dirty energy source, then, but it's still obviously a lot better And so is driving an old car or buying a used combustion, because that's the point you're making.
Because there's no manufacturing.
And then people say, oh, but you can't dispose of the batteries or your solar panels. Again, yes, there is a cost to everything. We're not saying it's zero.
It's all relative. You have to look at it in relative terms. One is going to be better than the other. But the best thing is the most efficient thing to do is to buy something that's already been manufactured. Yes. And is high efficiency. So
generally, that's the case for anything, including my clothing.
Right. Well, okay.
Used clothes. Got to buy used clothes now. Yeah. His face, folks. He really. You wouldn't go to a thrift store if you saw a cool shirt you like and buy. You have a weird thing about wearing something that someone else has worn.
So, as someone who kind of grew up hardscrabble, lower income,
that explains.
Yeah, that's. Like, once you leave that little space of your economic history, you never want to go back.
I understand. A lot of people have a lot of issues.
I will tell you it's interesting because I know and work with and manage money for lots and lots of wealthy people, including, a few billionaires. And not having money for a substantial percentage of your life really gives you a more intense appreciation of what money can and cannot do for you.
What is your biggest fear about money woes? That you won't be able to do what? You probably aren't worried about anything, right? In terms of money, right? You're not worried about your future health care or your home because you don't have kids, so you don't have to worry about leaving that, right?
No, but I've always had a somewhat atypical relationship with money. I don't think I ever had fears about money. I always just had a running total of my checking account balance. My wife used to make my wife crazy. And she'd say to me, you need to budget. I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth for that. I can't spend cycles thinking about, I hate the whole FIRE industry of let's the early retirement, let's save every penny and have to worry about someone taking too long of a hot shower because it's too expensive. I always hated that. My response to not having enough money was, damn, I better, rather than budget and watch every penny, which I found to be mentally distracting and annoying, I thought, well, I better figure out a way to make more money because this budgeting and being poor shit is for the birds. I can't do that anymore. I always laugh every time I see someone. I'm forgetting the pundit who loves to talk about if you spend $5 on a latte at Starbucks, you'll never retire.
Yeah.
And my answer has always been, if a $5 latte, the difference between a comfortable retirement or not, something else is wildly.
Yeah, I love that example. That's you told me that as soon as I lost my job at Sirius, and I was talking to you about these kind of things, and I was talking about how I've reined in all my spending, including that kind of a thing, and you shared that with me, and it stuck with me. But you know what? Yesterday, I took Julia to Starbucks. $9. She got a $9 drink.
Well, what did she get? A frozen frappe something or other?
It was a higher end. I mean, we don't mess around here, you know.
Yeah. By the way, they pissed me off during the pandemic. The same day, I got 2 emails. One was from Delta, right? And I fly enough that I'm not the top tier, but, I'm silver status, which gives you a couple of perks. It's not a big deal. Like if I buy a certain type of ticket, I could use the lounge. That's my perk. And I could board, like I'm number 5 in the boarding queue after people who are disabled, military veterans, first class. Like I'm ahead of the rabble, but just barely. And so Delta sends this email that says, hey, we know everything is messed up because of the pandemic. Don't worry. We know you're not flying this year, but we'll roll over your silver status till next year. I'm like, that cost them nothing. And gee, what a smart thing to do to increase my loyalty to Delta. Like very savvy, next level thinking. Like the same day I get an email from Starbucks. Hey, all of your Starbucks points, which you use when you buy our not inexpensive drinks, and every 52 drinks you get a free latte. that's going to expire in 30 days or 90 days or whatever it was. And I was like, what are you, high? Who cares? This is meaningless to you as a company. The least expensive part of running Starbucks is the food, the rent, the labor, everything else is expensive. The cost of a cup and a latte, you're going to screw me because I don't use this soon enough? Fuck you. So I called up Starbucks. I'm like, hey, you know all that free money, the $3 billion you've been carrying when people auto-load their Starbucks app with their credit card? Yeah, I'm not participating in that anymore. So I want you to refund the $50 that just showed up on my app, and I'll then go about canceling my app, and nice chatting with you. I'm not boycotting Starbucks, but, you know, if that's how a company is going to treat its clientele when the shit hits the fan, up yours. I don't need you. And so two companies, two very different approaches. One pissed off a huge swath of its clientele, and the other engendered a lot of loyalty. You know, we relate to corporations like they're these big faceless behemoths, but the reality is large companies are run by people, and some people, a little savvier, a little higher EQ. Sometimes it's not just, and this comes back to if the $5 is the difference between retirement or not. Sometimes it's not just what can we do to maximize every last penny. Sometimes you have to say, hey, how can we be decent human beings in a way that's good for us as a business, good for our clients, and works for everybody in the long run? You know, everything isn't a win-lose negotiation. Sometimes you can come up with a win-win. I think Delta, which, by the way, 10 years ago was terrible, and over the past 5 years has become my, U.S. airline of choice.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
They were awful 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, but it's just interesting because a lot of people say that they don't like Delta. I never know with airlines. People having...
So Delta was terrible. Delta was terrible for a long time.
I thought it was terrible.
They went through a full, hey, we got to shake up the Etch-a-Sketch and start over about 8 years ago, and I was super skeptical. I was a very Delta critical person, and I have to tell you, they have consistently exceeded my expectations. By the way, JetBlue is really good also. There's they're not like the only one, but if you've ever flown economy on American Airlines, you'll know
people decide their feelings about an airline if they travel just a little, probably shouldn't be really weighing in. But because you need a big enough data set so that it's not one random event. And the other thing, and I know like the busy travel season is over, but if you've ever worked in a service business, if you've ever worked as a waiter or a bartender or a busboy or whatever, or a waitress, or you have to recognize that the person at the gate is not the CEO of the fucking company, and for you to rip them a new asshole because the flight is delayed due to weather. I've done that. I did that once. I've told this before, but I just wanted you to know. And I went back the next week to that same gate because I would fly into DC every week, and I brought her flowers, and I apologized, and she got emotional because clearly it stuck with her.
People are jerks. People are just, especially when they're stressed. When people are stressed, So I got an upgrade a couple of years ago. I don't remember if it was Delta or somewhere, but I'm online to speak to a woman, and this guy is just, tearing her a new one. And I'm like, this guy is right. Why don't you control the weather? Why don't you make the rain stop and make the plane get here immediately?
That's awesome.
How can you not do this?
That's awesome.
And the woman basically starts to smirk, and the guy realizes, I'm that guy. Like, he had a moment, and he's like, I'm really sorry. And he turns red and walks away.
That is so great. I'm sorry, we're having a staffing problem. There's rules about pilots. How can you fly? How come you can't fly? You can run the gate, but you can't actually fly the plane. Go fly it.
So I said to the woman, she goes, is there anything I could do for you? And I'm like, and I just as a joke said, well, you can upgrade me to first class. And she punches it in. She goes, 2B. Yes. And I'm like, I was just kidding. She goes, I am not. Here's your new boarding pass. And I walked away like, wow.
That's awesome.
But it's like, I was just like, dude, you got to be less of a a travel bro jerk. And anyway,
that's great.
Anyway, and by the way, if I notice, I'm walking around pretty oblivious.
You're a dick. So if you're seeing, you're like me. I'm not saying like
it's not that I'm a dick. It's that I'm just sort of lost in my own world and I'm not paying attention.
No, let's be honest. If we see people being assholes, they must be really bad. Is all we're saying.
There's like a whole world that exists beneath my sense of observation, which can be very astute in narrow areas. But around the world around me, like I can, I could be oblivious.
I know.
And so,
I've met you. So have you heard about this?
By the way, what are we talking about today?
Well,
when are we going to? By the way, every interview you do around now, I'm like, so what do you say we start recording and start talking about stuff? To which you always say,
trust me. I've got it under control. I know what I'm doing.
You say we've been recording for 12 minutes.
Oh, shit. We've already been recording, as always. And it says that it's recording here.
It says live, 1504. It doesn't say recording.
Will you allow me to use these video clips even though you're in a T-shirt? Because I'll share
Unshaven. I did get a haircut yesterday.
I'm going to share this clip, getting your consent.
Friday.
I need your consent to share video on video, please.
Absolutely not. Under no circumstance.
Come on.
All right. Okay.
So I wanted to ask you about the economy, where we're at, any big, obviously, financial stories. That's what I always want to talk with you about. But for some reason, you interviewed one of the greatest, Bill Browder, on your podcast, Masters in Business, available anywhere you get podcasts on the Bloomberg Network. Why did you interview Bill Browder, who is, of course, the author of several books, but he's
Red Notice, Freezing Order.
More importantly, he's a big deal in your world. And finance used to be heavily invested in Russia. And I mean, I don't think I need to explain who he is to people. But anyway, why are you talking to him?
Well, first, my dirty little secret about interviews is I do interviews with people I want to have a conversation with.
Sure.
And I have an audience of one. Me, and if other people come along, great. So of all the things people can accuse me of, selecting guests insincerely is not one of them. So that's number one. Number two, easy to get through the gatekeepers at Bloomberg, because he ran Hermitage Capital, which was at one point in time the largest outside investor in Russia. The story is, just mind-boggling. If that was a work of fiction, it would fail because no one would believe it. It's just too ridiculous.
Yeah.
And because it's real and horrifying. And then even more insane is how effective he has been in changing the dynamics around what Putin and his oligarchs can do.
Yeah, I mean, he's so effective that when Putin met with his secret agent, Donald Trump, Putin was basically like, here's what I want. And also I want Magnitsky. I want him, and get rid of the Magnitsky Act, but send me him.
Right.
I'm not Magnitsky. I want Browder.
Right.
And he literally tried to, of all the people he asked for in America, he's like, give me Bill Browder.
Who, by the way, lives in London, which is kind of ironic. So anyway, I just thought, he had the new book come out. I thought Red Notice was amazing, and Freezing Order just sort of tells the story of what happened in the 5 years since that book came out. And, given the Russian invasion of Ukraine, between his finance background and how topical and current it is, I thought this would be a great time to have a conversation with him. And it did not disappoint. I was genuinely surprised how many people said, of all the interviews you've done, this one is the best, which is shocking to me. I would tell you a great double feature is this one, and then Ken Feinberg on the 9/11 Victims Fund are just, even in horrible tragedies, there are people who rise to the occasion and just exceed everybody's expectations for what an individual is capable of doing. And both of these gentlemen, Feinberg and Browder, just, how many of us could have done what he did? It's just,
I'm not going to compare him directly to those, but I think when the book has been written, someone's going to write a book about Joe Biden's chief of staff, Ron Klain. this guy's been involved and had his hands in so many important things, and, you know, not maybe as much headlines about one thing, but so many things that he's managed. And you see where Biden and Democrats are right now. What a bounce back. What a recovery. Like nothing I've ever seen covering politics in such a short time. And that has to do with a lot of things that you talk about, obviously, which has been inflation and gas prices obviously affect voters and presidential approval ratings, which they shouldn't necessarily, but they do. What do you think of, you know, how he's come back as a result of some of the things that have gotten done and just the circumstances that have changed around something as simple as gas prices?
So there's a lot of things that are driving this approval rating change, and the possibility that not only will the Democrats retain the Senate, but may even pick up a couple of seats. Gasoline prices and inflation are certainly one thing, but I think you and I have had the conversation about Roe v. Wade for a decade. We've talked about this, and before it was overturned, my view was, Roe v. Wade has worked against the interest of the left, and people always push back on that. And why is that? Well, you could take purple states like Pennsylvania or Georgia or Arizona or Florida or even Ohio and Michigan, and you could be a pro-life Republican, so you get the benefit of that from the base, but there's no penalty from the other side because you could get suburban moms to vote for you who are very pro-life, very pro-choice, because, hey, listen, I may personally be pro-life. That's my religious beliefs. But Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. And that sort of dodge has allowed a lot of people to be elected at the state level in the assembly and governorship, and at the federal level, congresspeople and senators, that goes away. And so, number one, you suddenly have people saying, I'm pro-choice, you're pro-life, why should I vote for you? Right. And you can't say, well, my views aren't relevant, which, by the way, turns out to be a massive lie, because not only did the Senate put in several religious pro-life justices, but you've seen what is it now, 22 states have not just restrictions on abortion. Listen, lots of us who are pro-choice say, you know, you really shouldn't be doing abortions in the third trimester unless the life of the mother is in danger.
They aren't. That's a straw man.
I understand that. But what I'm saying is,
just to be clear,
those are the sorts of things that I think people agree on. And when it's like no abortions under any circumstances, even in the case of rape, incest, or if the mother's life is in danger, you know, there's a reason why 74% of new voter registrations are women. It's wildly disproportionate to anything that's come back. I've read several things from people. I'm not in politics, but a number of people have said in politics that this is unlike anything they've seen in 40 years.
That's what I'm saying.
I think Roe v. Wade being overturned, especially when you look at just sort of a shady way that majority was gotten. First with the Merrick Garland vote, then the last one who came in. Wait, I thought we don't do
Amy Coney Barrett after,
right. It's after the election. I mean, the grand takeaway from the right is they don't have a political philosophy. It is just about the raw exercise of power. There's no belief system. It's kind of shocking to me.
You shared that great piece by Bruce Bartlett at your blog about the future Republican Party, where he's basically saying, even if Trumpism dies or Trump dies, what is left of the Republican Party? They have no platform. So many people have been making this point. I mean, a whole bunch of certainly former Republicans who still consider themselves conservatives making these points, that there's no policy platform. It's just cult of personality, and it's just, as you said, about hurting other people that you don't like, or I mean, they don't have any ideas to make government work for the people in any way at all. It's just about getting elected, getting power, and being a dick. That's what I say.
It all comes down to power. That's what it's about. And you know, I'm not saying that the Democrats are not interested in power. That would be silly to suggest something like that. But they're more interested in power in order to engage in a philosophy, in order to engage in a set of policy decisions. Why do they want Medicare to be able to have competition on drug prices? Because it's better for families. Forget the whole inflation argument. It's better for everybody in the country, except for a small group of pharmacy companies who, like every other business in the country, should be forced to compete on price and quality. They're exempt from that is a little ticking gift that George Bush gave us with Medicaid Part D.
Well, the most pernicious or evil conservative policy idea or just obstruction is that a state like Texas, one of the most populated states, bigger than most countries, one of the poorest, most uninsured, with like 25% of people that don't have insurance. These are old numbers, but around that, the federal government will pay for them the Medicaid expansion that was created under Obamacare.
And they don't do it.
And they won't allow it. Like, imagine being a nonprofit or a company and be like, we're going to pay for your people's health care. And be like, no, we don't want them to have it. They should work harder. They're poor. It is so fucking disgusting. The money's there. It's paid for. And they say no. Why?
It's gotten to the point where there is no belief system. There's no philosophy. It's governing by trolling.
Yeah.
Right? When you look at someone like an Abbott or a DeSantis, I mean, there was a really interesting piece. It was either the Washington Post or a larger Florida paper that talked about how Ron DeSantis, how the governor of Florida, manipulates the media. And it talks about he makes these, he's a seagull. He comes in, he eats your French fries, he shits all over everything, he flies away. So every time there's a new subject, he comes in, grand things, we're going to prosecute voter fraud and blah, blah. And then he disappears and there is no prosecution. Or the state itself was complicit in registering ex-felons and encouraging them to vote.
Right.
Which, by the way, the federal government should absolutely intervene there. That's absolutely...
well, of course, ex-felons should be allowed to vote. They serve their time. It's an unbelievably inhumane policy that
It's not only is it inhumane, it was geared as a form of racism.
Yeah, Michelle Alexander covers it all in the new Jim Crow, and it's just so stupid. Okay, so let me ask you this. We've got Ritholtz, and when you're talking to Ritholtz, you like to say something like this. You say, tell me something I don't know about markets, which is anything. So Ritholtz, pick a market, any market, could be energy, could be automobiles. You got the new California law, could be housing or anything else. Tell me something about a market that I don't know, which again is anything that you tell me.
So let's talk about the labor market, which I think is really fascinating. That when you look at the labor market, and we've talked about minimum wage before, the complaint today is that all these rising wages are inflationary. No one wants to talk about the fact that lagging wages for 4 decades were deflationary, but hold that aside. So why do we have such a shortfall of so many positions? And it turns out that there's 4 or so key drivers. And we've talked about each of these in the past, but not all at once. So in no particular order, just the first is the pandemic. When you give people $1.4 trillion in unemployment insurance and say, stay at home for a year, some people expected those folks to just sit around and, watch TV and drink beer and eat potato chips. But as it turned out, all those people, or many of those folks, went out and got online college degrees. They got technical accreditations. They launched new apps and new businesses. New business formation during the pandemic hit a record level. And lots of people said, I don't have to work for anybody else. I can make a nice living on my own terms working for myself. Now, not everybody has those skills. Not everybody has those abilities. But so many people did that folks who used to be employed laborers in the workforce are now small business owners working for themselves. So that's the first thing. Well, if a big chunk of those people disappeared from the labor force, what does that mean for everybody else? Well, let's look at who else is not available to be hired. 1 million. How many Americans died from COVID? It's probably more than we know, but it's 2 million. And even if that's wildly skewed to the older age cohort, it still means that there's lots of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s who would be working but are today no longer with us. So that's a big chunk. By the way, add to that the 15 to 30 million people who have long COVID. And it is a debilitating disease. And many of those people are either not working or on disability, and they're not in the labor force. The one that really fascinates me, that we're starting to see some changes from this administration, has been immigration. Immigration has been decreasing. Legal immigration has been decreasing for about 20 years. And it took a huge drop during the Trump administration, and that drop continued during the Biden administration.
Well, just to be clear, legal immigration, that trend, legal versus illegal immigration, changed because it used to be legal to immigrate here. There used to be a system, and
but there were ceilings, there were limits.
Sure,
there wasn't like anybody could come.
There's always been limits, but let's be clear: conservative anti-immigration policy has influenced every single department and every law, which makes it way harder to come into America legally and stay here, much less come in here legally and have a kid and let that kid stay here. I mean, with DACA. So let's be clear. They've made it so much harder to come into America. Hence, the illegal immigration is continuing because these people are looking for work. Sorry, go ahead.
If you want to get a handle on inflation, well, bring in 5 million more workers from Europe, from Mexico, from wherever they want to come.
Yeah.
And suddenly, ice cream cones don't have to cost $9 because you can put people who are thrilled to get an entry-level job as part of their green card process. You can end inflation. I can end most of employment-related inflation tomorrow if you let me. That's easy enough to do.
Wow.
So that's another factor that's driving labor. And so, you take all these things. You take the deaths from COVID. You take long COVID. You take the loss or the reduction in numbers of legal immigrants. And by the way, illegal immigration is down also. So those folks aren't working, which is going to that means more food left rotting in the field and higher food prices. You take all those plus the number of people who upskilled during the lockdown, and that's a recipe for a 5 million person shortfall out of the 160 million or so people who are working legally in the U.S. And all these things make a big difference around the periphery, around the edge. It's rare that, almost every market is somewhat in balance. Hey, if there's a buyer and a seller, it means we're pretty much in balance. When markets crash, it's because there are no buyers and there's a ton of sellers. When markets become bubbles, when they explode to the upside, it's the opposite. Lots of buyers, no sellers. And so typically everything is balanced. There's someone who's hiring, someone who wants to get hired. There's a range that everybody agrees on is a fair salary, and people go to work. When you're a few million bodies short, that's how you go from a $9 minimum wage to, speak to any small business owner that is in retail or restaurants. You can't get anybody for less than $15. By the way, if you're making less than $15 an hour and you're listening to this, go to your boss and say, hey, Bob's down the street offered me $15 an hour. I don't want to go there, but you're paying me $12. I need $15.
Yeah.
And you'll get $15 or you'll be working at Bob's. But those are your,
what if you're just
giant shortfall?
What if you're bluffing? There is no Bob's. What do you say to that kid?
Well, that's a whole different story. If you're going to bluff, you have to be prepared to lose. That's
Hey, before you go, have you heard of this idea of quiet quitting?
Yeah, I think it smells like a lot of bullshit to me.
The term that suggests a norm where people do more work than they're paid for. And
less work than they're paid for.
Less work than
they're disengaged. Listen, there's always a percentage of people who are disengaged. And there's a handful of stories about people working remotely, doing two jobs. right? Getting paid for 2 full-time jobs that really are 20, 25 hours out of 40 is enough to get by without getting fired. So you take 2 of those and you basically, now you're not making 70 grand, you're making 140 grand remotely. That's real money. So there's stories about that. I'm not a big buyer in that because people who are working remotely or any white collar job, really any job, there's so much data available to analyze today. It's so easy to say, what has this person accomplished? How productive are they? Where are they relative to our other employees? Like, if someone is really lagging, during the 90s, companies like PaineWebber that are now part of, they've been absorbed 3 or 4 times, and other Lehman Brothers, Salomon Brothers was notorious for this. Each quarter, or I don't know if it was quarterly or annually, but the bottom 5% of their workforce was fired. And what was the purpose of that? Just to light a fire under everybody's ass. There was no quiet quitting. There was no I'm not engaged. It was a blood sport. It was hyper competitive. But it seems like, that's a horrible way to live. But when that was taking place, there was no stories about quiet quitting.
But it would seem that for years there's been a trend, especially, we've been talking about this forever. After 2008, the economic collapse, that the guy sitting next to you got laid off, and now you're doing that guy's job, and you're not getting paid anymore. There seems to be this trend that there's one.
Now it's reversing.
Well, isn't that a good thing? The quiet quitting, the newly coined term for when workers only do the job they're being paid to do without taking on extra duties or participating in extracurriculars.
That's not quiet quitting. If here's your job and you do it and get paid, that's not quiet quitting. That's called working. Now, maybe you're not the best employee, but here's what we expect from you. Here are your tools. Go do it. And if you deliver what is expected of you, how is that quiet quitting? Quiet quitting are the people who just do as little as humanly possible and don't get fired. So maybe they're 10, 20, 30% below expectations, but we don't have enough bodies, so keep Fred. Fred sucks, but 70% of Fred is better than 0% of that desk once we fire Fred, and our other employees, we can't put Fred's duties on them. So some people are slacking off and getting away with it because there's a shortfall. Hey, people have surprisingly long memories, and as soon as every cycle turns, 10 years ago, we were arguing about how can the minimum wage be so low for so long? How can the gasoline tax be the same today as it was in 1991? All these things eventually. So now we have a big infrastructure bill that fixes all the crap that should have been on regular maintenance with the gasoline tax. And now you have workers with leverage. Capital had the upper hand for a long time. Now labor has the upper hand. If you think that's going to last forever, you haven't been paying attention. These things always change. And that means at some point in the future, capital will have the upper hand over labor again. And then Bob, who's been working his ass off and not quietly quitting, but doing a job and a quarter, and Fred, who's been doing 3/4 of a job, guess who's going to get shit canned and guess who's going to get promoted? So this too shall pass is the famous line. King Solomon asked for a reminder. So how can I make myself feel good when things are going poorly? And how can I reduce my hubris when things are going well? This too shall pass is a great philosophy, because whatever you're feeling now, it's not going to last. If things are terrible, you will adapt and things will get better. And if things are great, well, I think people felt great during the Obama administration, and you ended up with the Trump administration. I think people felt, at least a cohort of people felt terrible during the Trump administration. And I think they feel better now during the Biden administration, at least, the center and the center left.
Well, you're talking about political circumstances, but that idea.
But I mean, the whole gestalt of the country. I thought I thought through most of the Trump administration, like, I don't care about the politics. At a certain point, every headline, every news item, every cable channel can't be about the same guy day after day after day.
Well, I disagree with that when he's committing so many crimes. I mean, it's not like
but people were mentally exhausted about it. The flood the zone strategy of, if you do one crime, you get caught. But if you're just an endless parade of indictments and co-conspirators, and it just overwhelms people. Forget the gaslighting. At a certain point, it just emotionally exhausts people. In some ways, listen, I know many people who think Trump is an idiot and who got lucky. But in some ways, he has this bizarre insight into how to just stay on this side of the line. I mean, he has gotten away with stuff that would have, ended the career.
He doesn't have a bizarre. I mean, you're giving him too much credit. He has a lot of money to hire lawyers that litigate the fuck out of everything. His lawyers
are the worst. He's got the worst attorneys ever. Half of them have been disbarred.
You can
Some
say
of them
that,
are going to jail. A few of them are going to be bankrupt.
That's the reason. But you don't disagree with me.
What do you think? Other criminals don't have access to lawyers?
They do, and that's how a lot of bad people with a lot of money get away with it. I'm saying he has the worst lawyers in the world. Guess what? They just got him a special master. Like, he didn't come up with that idea himself.
Yes, he did. He appointed the least qualified federal judge in American history.
He appointed her,
and she turned around and made a decision that is right or left. There is yet to be a legal expert to weigh in to say, sure, it makes perfect sense that when you steal classified documents, that they should be reviewed for executive privilege. It's bonkers. You've had a ton of people. You've had very right wing. You had Bill Barr come out and say, this is fucked. Sure. I don't know how to interpret this.
Fully.
My point is,
when you're president, you get to appoint judges.
Any other mortal in America who did 10% of what Trump has done would be wearing an orange jumpsuit. And his genius maybe he studied The Sopranos and The Godfather and never put anything in paper.
He studied Roy Cohn. He never went to jail.
Did Cohn end up going to jail?
No, he died.
Right.
But he died a disgraced man, I think it's fair to say. But I'm saying, I mean, that's where he learned everything, and that's really what he's done. Don't pay people and then sue them. And if you get to be president, appoint judges that are, hopefully will scratch your back. And let's be clear, the Supreme Court didn't. He appointed those 3 judges and they didn't. This woman ended up coming up with the special master idea. But I'm saying he didn't. He got lawyers who knew that this was a possible argument that maybe one of these stupid judges he appointed would buy. He's always shopped around for the most favorable judges. And that's not some special insight. He's just a rich asshole with no morality. That's all I'm pushing back on it. You're giving him too much credit. By the
way, Roy Cohn, if memory serves, was closeted and died of AIDS.
That's right. I only know a lot of this because I just watched the HBO documentary on him. I think it was HBO. So good. So good. He was the worst. Like the second
terrible
worst
human being.
He created Donald Trump, though.
Arguably him and Lee Atwater and who else? Dick Cheney and George Bush were the test run for the Trump administration, because a lot of what Trump did was float trial balloons in that administration. Only he took it to the next level. Look, the fact that the whole Brooks Brothers riot that helped to secure
George
Bush
W. Bush
in the White House, and I'm not saying Bush stole the election, but a lot of what we've seen in the big lie traces back to that.
I mean,
and when you see the people who were there and the roles today, it's pretty shocking.
Isn't it crazy, these conspiracy theories that anyone from QAnon or the right comes up with, that so-and-so is here or there or whatever? In the meantime,
it's all projection.
Yeah, in the meantime, did George W. Bush steal the election? There's been a lot written about that in 2000. But let's be clear, his brother was the fucking governor.
Right.
Who appointed
tough conspiracy
the judge.
I don't know how we're going to break this one. Right?
This
is a tough nut to crack.
People would say that George W. Bush's cousin was the head of security at the World Trade Center, which is, implicates George W. Bush in Cheney's inside job. No, doesn't. It doesn't. There are some things that are coincidences, but I'm saying George Bush is running for president, and his brother was the governor of the state that had the questionable bail, and then appointed the judge. So,
the hanging chads.
If at best nepotism, if at worst stolen. Anyway, all right. Anything else?
There's a book I want to share with you, and I'm trying to find the name of it. You're so good at the
books. You suggested some of my favorite books of my life.
So this is a kind of interesting book because it looks at the world of disinformation very differently. So Dave McRaney, something like that, David McRaney, How Minds Change, The Surprising Science of Belief, Opinion, and Persuasion. And what's fascinating about this book is all the work I've done on behavioral finance and cognitive dissonance and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of the stuff we've been writing about and talking about and fighting about and fact-checking and disinformation. And it turns out that none of those things, facts, arguments, etc., none of those things are shown to have a significant impact on changing people's minds when they have a different belief system from you.
Yeah, I'm going to get this guy on, David McRaney, listener Dominic.
I have him coming up on the podcast in 2 weeks.
You've got him already?
But, I already have him booked, but... all
right, I'll cancel him and put him on my show.
No. You have to read the book because it's fascinating, and it tells a story of how all these different people who have fallen into certain types of belief systems, be them cults like Westboro Baptist or 9/11 truthers, how these people find their way out of this conspiracy theory and these falsehoods into something that's more rational and fact-based. And there, so far, I'm 3/4 of the way through the book, so far the two big ideas that have come out of the book is, the first is they have to, you're not going to change their minds. They have to change their own mind, meaning they have to be willing to change their mind. They have to have some recognition that what they believe in is problematic. And very often they reach that conclusion not in a straight line, but in some corollary thing. But then the second thing that's so important is the social community around where they're leaving and where they're going to is absolutely crucial to get them to change. So the 9/11 truther actually was better known as this meditation and positivity guy, and somehow fell down the 9/11 rabbit hole. And the way he got out of it, there's a BBC show on conspiracy theories where they take the conspiracy theorist and they take them through all the truth, and it almost never works.
Right.
And this guy interviewed architects and structural engineers with the BBC, sets it up, and survivors and people who lost people and people who were there that day. And, the person eventually comes out of it because there's another group that welcomes them in and doesn't force them to erase their entire universe. It helps them transition to a new universe, which is, here's what reality is. Hey, lots of people misunderstand this. So the structural engineer, he says, how is it possible for ignited jet fuel to melt, the structural steel that has a 4,000 point? And the engineer says, hey, it's a giant, billion-ton building. It doesn't have to melt it. It just has to bend it enough that it loses its ability to support, 100 tons above it. Why would you think you would need to melt it? It doesn't have to go away. It just has to lose sufficient
that's
structural
a tiny bit
rigidity.
Of the structural integrity.
So for lots of people, that argument doesn't carry any weight. Or the people who were survivors, or people who lost spouses who wept with them. And it was a group of 4 people who went. 3 of the people kind of laughed at the survivors. They thought they were crisis actors. this one person of the four was very much affected by it. And so those are just a couple.
Where is that documentary?
So this is not a documentary. It's a television show from BBC.
Okay.
That is discussed in the book. That every week they take a different group of.
Yeah, I think maybe I've heard of it, but the book is David McRaney, How Minds Change. And I want to shout out, I mentioned Dominic, but I'm just seeing, I searched his name in my email, and Randolph, another listener, suggested I get him on back in 2015. So I should have listened to him then. Anyway, I'll look into it and look forward to listening to him on your show.
His last book was You Are Not Smart. And it goes over all the cognitive foibles. And he uses this book to basically, by the way, that book is perfectly fine and it's absolutely right. But he uses this book as sort of a mea culpa to say, hey, I thought if I showed people all the ways they made mistakes, they would learn from it and make fewer mistakes and change their views on things they're wildly wrong about. And he's like, that turned out to be wrong. And the way I learned it was this, and this is what convinced me that I was wrong. And I wasn't, it wasn't my identity that people are wrong this way. But
I feel like I've talked to you about this. For a long time, there was this set of research that people depended on that said no matter how much you bring these people in, you interview them, you give them all the arguments, and they actually leave more convinced of their own argument.
The boomerang effect. When you tell somebody...
What's it called?
When you tell somebody who has a fundamental belief system, here's my belief system. Trump is the greatest president ever. Yeah. He's saving the country from pedophile Democrats, and that the election is no way he could have lost because, look, he created the vaccine. Look what a great job he did. And if he lost, it means the election was stolen. If you tell that person, well, here's the data. The United States had the worst of all the advanced open democracies. The U.S. had the worst results during the pandemic. We lost more people. We had less people vaccinated. We had fewer people boosted. We had more people infected. We have more people with long COVID. We had more people die on a per capita basis than any, advanced economy. We did terribly. And part of the reason he lost by almost 8 million votes, by over 7 million votes, is people were angry at the crappy job. Remember, it was going to go away in a week. It'll disappear like magic. He didn't take it seriously, bleach and ivermectin and all this crap. And that's why moderates voted against him. Those people leave more convinced that the election was stolen.
But there's new data that says that's that widely respected study is been debunked, that it's not necessarily true on everything all the time.
No, of course, nothing is true on everything all the time.
About what changes people's minds. The idea of, because it's very discouraging to imagine that if you got some conspiracy theorist or denier in and you gave them all the arguments that, effectively and respectfully, that they wouldn't be moved, that they'd even be more convinced. And that's discouraging, but apparently it's not true.
It's not true across the board 100%, but It is true that people, if you come at someone straight on and you say, you're wrong and here's why, that turns out to be an ineffective way to get them to convince. And in fact, the much better way to do it, it's just too time consuming.
Right. No way to scale it up.
No, is to just ask them questions.
Yeah.
And don't tell them anything. Because when they find it themselves, they're much more likely to believe it than you, who are a lefty, biased, whatever. Hey, just out of curiosity, after the November 3rd election, November 2nd election, doesn't the sitting president have an opportunity to contest things in court? Did Trump contest anything in court? Like, not snide, not obnoxious. These couldn't have all been Democratic judges. What percentage of these judges were Republicans?
Yeah.
And what percentage of those Republicans were Trump appointees? And so you could just ask, it's not a debate. It's like, hey, I don't want to argue with you about this. I'm just curious. Doesn't he have the right to judicial review? And so you're kind of going to force them to either say, someone said to me, I was having this discussion with someone and they said, those judges have no balls. They were not willing to go against the consensus. And I'm like, which? The judges who were appointed for life and can short of, short of committing a felony can never be removed? Yeah. Those judges? Is that your, I just want to know if it's at your position that lifetime appointees were afraid to decide based on the facts and evidence in front of them.
I think one of the most...
I just want to know, is that... So at a certain point, I can't help it. I have to just go there. But I've given up trying to convince people. It's a waste of time.
Well, you know what you made me think? If it's just about this one thing, the election, the most... as you said, and it's hard to scale this up. There's not enough time to take these people one by one. But you know what has been the most effective thing has been the January 6th committee hearings. And
amazing.
Because they've taken the former Attorney General Bill Barr, who is his fixer, who did everything for Trump, and they put him, on. He's like, I told Trump it was all bullshit. I told him there was no evidence. That kind of thing, seeing him say that and that entire trial, everything that we've learned, very convincing, because all the arguments that you just made are kind of all made there by his own people, Trump's own administration, because they're saying, I don't want to go to jail.
So it's convincing to a fair-minded, open-minded person.
Okay,
so
yeah.
The January 6th committee is most effective at convincing independents and liberal Republicans. But the 30%, the hardcore MAGA base, listen, Trump has admitted crimes publicly. It's never going to change their view.
Yeah.
You just have to accept the minority party has tacked in a very, very different direction. So, the tribal aspect of this, the people who self-identify as MAGA, this elected official who was part of Cowboys for Trump, who was also part of the insurrection, who was barred for life from office. I would hope we would see more of those happen.
Yeah, well,
if you participated in... No, these were just tourists. So I think everybody who says that, we should get 1,000 people and tour their house in the same way. We're just tourists. We just want to show you what, It's, all this comes back to... But by the way, my favorite, the most perplexing part of the book is there's this group in California that is a pro-marriage equality, gay rights group that is really well funded. And part of their funding is that they spend all this money at, I don't remember if it was UCLA or USC, which is a group that studies how to influence people in their decision-making process. And they used to, in a very Jehovah's Witness way, go out and knock on doors and have these conversations. And this went on for years, and it was wholly ineffective. They were completely unable, and sometimes they would record these, and sometimes they would videotape them, but wholly ineffective, years and years of canvassing and knocking on doors. And in reviewing their data, they kind of found that the only areas where they found people they could effectively reach is where they somehow relate some incident in their past and realize that they're part of the same social community that support gay marriage or support equal rights or support. And so this group completely rejiggers, this is in the book, completely rejiggers the way they go out and canvass. And instead of going out with facts and figures and trying to, browbeat these people into change, hey, we're doing a survey. We want to know, how, here's this, Prop 9 was a giant failure. And so that's what sent them back to the drawing boards to rejigger this. I think they lost 52 to 48, something like that. When going into it, they thought they were leading. And they found if they could get people to talk about a personal experience, someone they know, someone they have relationships with, and hey, we're just doing a survey about Prop 9 and how, what your views are.
You mean Prop 8?
And some people, Prop 8, whatever it was.
Yep.
And when you could get a person to say, either they were prejudiced against white or black, it didn't matter, or they have a family member who was experienced, don't you want your nephew to be happy? Don't you want him to find love? Why do you want... But not in a threatening way and not in an adversarial way and not in a finger-wagging way. It's all, hugs and smiles. It's all, we want to know how people voted and why. And they supposedly have this new method has a 10% success rate in changing people's votes on marriage equality. Now, 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but in politics, people are killing for 1/10 of a percent. 10% is landslide. 10% is world changing. And so that's how he kind of begins the book, explaining how this has evolved and how learning about that changed his approach to persuasion. So
David,
really fascinating.
McRaney, How Minds Change, and you can hear him coming up on Masters in Business.
End of this month.
I'll get him on. Barry, thank you for joining me. As always, have a great weekend or whatever you're doing.
I am leaving on Sunday. By the time this tomorrow on Saturday, by the time this airs, I will be in Huntington Beach, California, for the giant future-proof conference that my firm and working with Advisor Circles, really the producers and logistic people on this event, is putting on. And the thought process was very simply, we've been stuck inside during the pandemic for so long. The last thing in the world anyone wants is to go to the Javits Center or some big Hilton conference center. So we took over the beachfront in front of, a couple of miles of hotels, and the whole conference is outdoor on the beach in sunny California.
Very exciting. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Very different approach to, we wanted to do something different.
Future-proof.
Future-proof. I'll send you a link.
Looking forward to hearing more about it. Have a great trip, and thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure.
All right, there he goes, Barry Ritholtz, everybody. What do you think? What do you say? Let him know on the Twitter today. At Ritholtz, at Behind Your Back, Maura, Quint. Thank you very much for joining me. Be a part of the street team. Help us promote the show. If you'd like to join our little meetings, email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Whatever skills you have, we'd like to utilize them. And it's always a great hang. We get to know each other. Just another way to be a part of our community and help promote this show. I appreciate it. You appreciate it because I'm here every day. Can't do it without you. Sign up for a paid subscription right now. Go to standupwithpete.com or patreon.com/Pete Dominic. That's today's show. I have to go. Thank you, Jon Carroll, for singing us in and singing us out, as always, to Pete Co. as well. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Be the change you want to see in the world. Love you guys.
You got the kidneys, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up